Well, this is a most unpleasant task I've got before me right here now, isn't it? I've been eagerly awaiting the full release of Ultimate Admiral Dreadnoughts for 3 years or more now, as it is one of very few games that covers this particular period, this particular style of strategy of naval warfare, and certainly there are not a whole lot of games, if damn near any at all, that does it with the degree of competency, passion, and skill that Games Labs do. Or at the very least, did and attempt to do. See, this is where the tragedy comes into play. I am going to have to lead right away by saying, do not purchase this game right now. And I do genuinely hate to say that. The game arrived out of early access very suddenly and not fully formed, in my opinion. The developer is also being a pinch unclear as to the game's future, having promised to support it for the next 6 months and then God only knows what. They have promised to release a roadmap in the near future, however, so do check out the game's Steam page, if nothing else, which will hopefully be linked down in the description below, to see what exactly the plans are for Ultimate Admiral Dreadnoughts, as man, I hope this game can be recovered, but the state it is in right now is rather rough, which we will get into over the course of the video. So, what is Ultimate Admiral Dreadnought? Well, as you can probably imagine and see from the enormous battleship here, it is a naval strategy-focused game focused around the Dreadnought era from 1890 to 1930, 40, I think. It goes for quite some time, with the focus being laid squarely on the metal behemoths that ruled the era. This is also complete with several full campaigns with lots and lots of nations, which we'll have a look at in a second, and also a custom ship designer, which is by far the game's best feature, so we're going to have a look at it right now. You can produce all the way up to super battleships here, with absolutely enormous 508 centimeter main guns with 4 barrels. That is a rather monstrous weapon, to put it mildly. And the game has a ton of different hulls to choose from, even hulls specific to certain nations and certain eras. With weapons as well, you can have superimposed barbettes to have super firing guns, you can have torpedo launchers, underwater torpedo launchers, entire torpedo batteries, you can make torpedo battleships, if you so please. The game's in-game ship designer is absolutely amazing, and it is exactly that kind of work of genuine passion and dedication that GameSlab has made a reputation out of creating. But GameSlab has also had a little bit of a difficult history as of late, primarily around the fact that they have been developing a little bit too many games with a little bit too little in the way of resources and focus, resulting in a series of mediocre titles. Ultimate Admiral Age of Sail was alright, but certainly a far cry from Ultimate General Civil War. This Land Is My Land also kind of released a little bit undercooked, and Naval Action, a game that I think entered into early access in like 2016, is still not really fully done. It feels unfinished. And Ultimate Admiral Dreadnought, unfortunately, adds its name to that long list of so close but not quite there titles. Let me move on into a campaign game here. Actually, before that, there is a Naval Academy, which is essentially a challenge and teaching semi-tutorial mode, with some really damn cool scenarios, and there is quite a lot of them as well, so this will keep you busy for a while if you choose to engage with it. The campaigns, you've got a ton of nation. Austria-Hungary, Japan, Spain, China, Britain, France, Germany, United States, Russia, and Italy. A ton of nations. Unfortunately, they don't play all that differently, though they do have some differences in the design of their warships. You can start as early as 1890 or as late as 1940, where you can also set up the difficulty, of course, and whether or not the AI will use the blueprints for ships that you generate to try and make things a little bit fairer. You might want to do so because the AI's ship design, well, it's derpy at times. But we're going to jump into my ongoing Japan campaign here to have a look at it. Now, the game does not have aircraft at all, which is a fairly large oversight, considering it lasts all the way up to 1940, of course. I do not believe there are any plans to add them in either, which is a bit of a shame. It does have submarines, but they're not really fleet units. Instead, you build them, and they will roam around the map, and they will have percentage chances of sinking enemy commerce vessels, or even attacking their straight-up warships if they get a chance to shoot at them. This is the campaign map, as you can see right here. Being an admiral, all you really care about is naval provinces, and the ground combat is automated. Now, you don't have any effect on it other than if you are launching a naval invasion. Otherwise, the AI will launch so-called major offensives, and a bunch of dice will be rolled to see whether or not territory is seized or not. It can be rather difficult to see who owns what. For example, South Germany is currently owned by France after Germany got its ass kicked in a war and eventually broke into pieces, becoming actual Germany after having lost that war. Tragically, their flag doesn't really change, which is a little annoying. Same with the Russians here. As you can see, the Russian flag has gone... No, they have changed into the Soviet one, I now believe. That's nice, at least. So maybe reloading the game will fix it. Oh, it didn't do it for the Germans, but oh well. I've waged a few wars against China. As you can see, I've got a few holdings there. And I've also grabbed a couple of German islands as well. In the campaign mode, you have somewhat command of your nation's politics, and that you can kind of antagonize people. To get things rolling a little bit here, we are going to increase tensions with the Soviet Union. You can also administer some of your nation's finances via the naval budget, such as spending money on transport capacity to increase the overall money to the cap of 200%, and also the budget spent on training crew, which will give you more trained crewmen, and their average training will also go up. It is, however, rather expensive, and you might start losing a lot of money, especially if you're also going to be focusing on the tech budget, as the game also has a fully fledged tech tree. This tech tree looks a little bit simplistic, but it's actually kind of cool, because when you unlock a new technology, you get several new technologies, and you can unlock improvements to those technologies, like simply just better variants of the same gun. Better explosives, better shells, better gun layout, and even mines and submarines as well, though mine warfare and submarines are both things that happen more or less automatically on the map. Finally, of course, you've also got the ship design manager as well in the campaign, where you can make your dream vessel, where you unlock new hulls as you continue through. For example, the biggest ship I've unlocked now is the Dreadnought hull, which is the boss of the ocean, and all the way down to piddly little torpedo boats. You can set up their armaments depending on what you want. For example, you could make a fairly light but fast ship. Let's say, for example, a light cruiser designed for some commerce raiding. So we want a fairly high speed for the time, 19-something, of a 24-knot cruiser, right? Okay, you can see the total weight up here and the cost of it. So it says I need a main tower, okay? We're going to build a main tower. We're also going to need a rear tower. These towers will have various effects. For example, plus aiming speed, base accuracy, damage control, minus target signature, and tower spotting, torpedo spotting. So this will help me aim, it will help me spot torpedoes, but it will also make it easier for the enemy to see me because I've got an enormous mast over my ship. Duh. You can also set the ship's displacement, which might make it longer or shorter, so you can have a very small light cruiser, for example, where you might be able to pack a little bit more into a smaller ship, and of course that will reduce the price. As you increase the displacement, the price will increase significantly. Right now, the largest ship I can build is 6,500 tons, so let's go for that. We're also going to need some funnels to let out the smoke, so we've got these here. These seems pretty good. That gives me an engine efficiency of 14%, because I've got a pretty damn powerful engine here, so let's put down 2 funnels. We'll move that a little bit forward, like that. That gives me 27.9%. Then we're going to upgrade the boilers from natural to induced boilers, which are having a bunch of negative effects, like increased smoke, for example, which will screw with my targeting, but it will increase my engine efficiency by quite a lot. You can also have other upgrades, like the engine, for example, auxiliary engines in case one is knocked out, hydraulic steering, anti-flooding measures, extra bulkheads, double-layered hull. You can have different types of armor, citadel protection, rangefinders, mines, weapons, etc., etc. This part of the game is absolutely excellent, and no doubt about it. You will also develop new weapons as you play as well, like the 15.2 centimeter gun, which is the bread and butter of most of my navies these days, or 17.8, which is a relatively new addition to my cruiser arsenal, and eventually you'll also be able to get double-barreled or even triple-barreled weapons as well as you begin to upgrade them, even as some of the larger hulls will already have access to that through research. For example, I can have a double-barreled 330 centimeter weapon here, or 33 centimeter, 330 centimeter. That'd be a big gun. You also need to take into consideration a ton of additional factors. Let's load up the Eva Camus, for example, my biggest and baddest ship at the moment. It's armed with, I believe, 12 inches? Yes, 305 centimeter guns, 16 152s, and 8 single 152s. So you've got the top-mounted ones here, and you've also got the hull-mounted ones down here. The ship has a pretty damn respectable speed of 23 knots and an excellent engine efficiency. You also need to worry about the pitch and the roll of the ship, and whether or not it is imbalanced. For example, if I was to refit the ship, and I were to move the gun forward, for example, like this, can move that over, you can see the 4-weight offset will start increasing. And as the 4-weight offset starts increasing, the negative handling characteristics of the ships start increasing as well. So if the ship is very unbalanced, it'll start dipping heavily into the waves. It might start pitching and rolling, unfortunately, as well. As you gain new upgrades, this will become less of a problem, and as you get a nice big heavy engine to center the mass of the ship near towards the bottom, this will also become a more stable and useful gunnery platform. There's a whole ridiculous long list of various things you can consider and think about here as you make adjustments to your ships. Again, this part of the game, amazing, and really shows that lovely attention to detail that GamesLab is so rightly famous for. Now let's return back to the campaign map and see if we can't get ourselves into some sort of a conflict. The UI is one enormous weakness, by the way, because, I mean, look at this. This looks like early access UI. I mean, hell, this pop-up covers most of the screen, makes it very difficult to maneuver. Furthermore, I don't have a lot of control over my fleet. If I want to make a custom fleet, for example, I've got to go out and move ships to various ports so as to try and build the correct fleet where I want it, how I want it. You don't really have any influence on where the ships go during wartime, by the way, so you can't simply set up a fleet and say you stay in this fleet formation at all times, other than making it and then placing it on the map and then giving it a mission. All other ships will be carrying out their various missions like convoy raiding, etc. This could be a lot easier. There should be a create fleet button which sets up a standard, and then with a quick and easy build button as well. Right now, you can see I am constructing some ships, but they are currently being sold to some of the allied minor nations. I can choose to cancel this sale and take over the ship myself, which is something that a bunch of nations, of course, rather famously did during the Second and First World War as well. Britain, in particular, cancelled quite a few. But, of course, that's going to piss off the miners. Minor nations are... You can't really engage in diplomacy with them at all. You can't choose to invade them, for example. You can't choose to influence them. Instead, they come to you via various story events over the course of the campaign, which might give you the opportunity to ally with them, to trade with them, to sell them warships, etc. Whereas the majors you can influence via the politics screen again. So I have already antagonized the Soviet Union, so we'll see what comes of that once we end our turn. The end turn button gets relatively slow as you begin advancing in the game, but not painfully so. You may also notice the lack of music, in-game music at least. That is because all of the music is copyrighted, as it has apparently some difficulties with the copyright process. A serious incident has occurred which involves the Soviet Union. One of their profound politicians was assassinated in cold blood, and their government accuses us that we are behind this. Some spell checking as well. They ask for humiliating concessions to forget the matter. How should we respond? Nope, I am more than happy to get a little bit of a war with the Soviet Union, so there we go. Nice and simple. Greece would like to order more destroyers from me. I'm actually entirely fine with that, as I do still have a little bit of shipyard capacity. Now, since we are at wartime, that also means that my income, my budget, increases drastically. So suddenly, I can afford to try and train my cadets to a standard above green again, which would be nice. I'm also going to use this opportunity to lay down some further shipyards to try and expand my port capabilities and my ability to produce further warships. Now, we have some fleets up here. In fact, we've got some pretty large fleets up here. So I am going to have my big boy fleet sally out into the Northeast Asian Ocean right here. See if it can't find himself some Russians. The rest of my fleet is going to do whatever they've been set to do. So the heavy cruisers are set to sea control. Perfect. That means they'll be going off and raiding. And a bunch of the others are sea control as well and in being. So I should already be able to raid the enemy reasonably well. I've also got some mine layer destroyers here as well, which I am going to send up to Vladivostok for the time being. There we go. They're nice and fast, so even if they run into something, they should be able to GTFO should that happen. And now, let's see if something interesting occurs so we can have a look at the combat system in the game. A few turns later, and finally we get at least a little bit of action here with an ambush with 6 of my DDs against 3 enemy heavy cruisers. The AI set up a naval invasion against Japan and then simply elected to never actually do anything, and I am currently navally invading the northern Sakhalin as well without the AI actually doing a whole lot about it. You can also see here that the Soviet Union and Spain, of all people, are carrying out an invasion into Manchuria, which is currently occupied not by me, sadly, but by China, I do believe. So China is currently also at war with them. Now, I'd hoped for a bit of a bigger battle to demonstrate things, but let's at the very least have a look at the ambush, shall we? And maybe we'll find something a bit more sizable as well. I was hoping to be able to engage that big Soviet fleet, but, well, the thing is, you can put stuff on the map, but it's very much so the video game that decides whether or not those things will actually come to blows or not. So you can see the little lovely in-game models here. We've got a bit of a derpy mix, though, as I've only got, I think, one... Yes, I've only got one actual gun destroyer. Ah, yep. That was loud, I bet you. The AI's ability to maneuver the ships are a big problem in the game. Let's try to... And they're not going to stop making that noise for a while either, I'm afraid. Let's try to join together these two divisions here of torpedo destroyers. We're going to put down their speed a little bit so they can catch up. And we'll have this destroyer just try to move out of the way. Now, with a relatively few small number of units, getting them to get organized is not as big of a pain as with some of the larger armies. When you spawn in with full, actual proper fleets, getting them organized is one of the most frustrating experiences I have had in a very long time. We're talking hitting the desk level frustrating. It is a pain in the ass, as the ships will sort of try to auto-organize themselves in many certain ways. For example, there is an option to turn on avoid ships, which in theory you would think, excuse me, would mean that your ships would try to avoid crashing into your own ships. That sounds like a fairly reasonable thing for them to do, right? And it certainly would, except they're not very good at it, as was demonstrated immediately here. There is also the Avoid Torpedoes button, which appears seemingly whenever the video game wishes for it to do. The destroyers do not have that option right now, for example. And in larger formations, you're also supposed to be using these here, like Screen, Scout, Follow, and Retreat. The only one that works is Retreat and Steady. Everything else just makes your ship ram each other continuously over and over and over again. And one of the big issues that have remained since the beta, and that GameSlab have been told about again and again and again, yet seemingly have no interest in changing, is that when the lead ship in a formation gets hit, the game tries to maintain the formation speed and heading by having the lead ship withdraw. And so in this case, if the Mochizuki got hit, the Kuwa would become the lead ship, as the Mochizuki would try to bend out of the line and join in near the rear instead. Now, in theory, that sounds lovely, but what in reality happens almost every single time is that the next ship in line will ram the first ship that was ahead of it. Or if it won't do that, it'll do something equally ridiculous, like, well, the AI has currently taken control of this ship, I believe. Sometimes the AI, you've got to turn the AI on or off to regain proper control of your ship, which is rather frustrating as well. In this case, I've actually lost the rudder, so I can't... There we go. As you can see, now that I've actually got control of the ship, suddenly, even with a damaged rudder, it steers way better. I have no idea what causes that, it just seems to happen. Now I'm going to have this one pop smoke, and I'm going to have it retreat out of there. In the meantime, I am going to... Was I too late? Yes, I was. I was going to say I was going to tell this formation to hold its torpedoes until I could get a decent angle on things. I do... Did I hit that? No, I did not hit that. The AI gets incredibly good torpedo aiming. You do not get incredibly good torpedo aiming. Your torpedo aiming can be rather dreadful, though you do have various settings to try and make it less dreadful, like, for example, save, which means that they will fire only when they've got a pretty good torpedo solution. Most of the time, you'll miss, unless you are literally point blank with the enemy, which is, again, a little bit frustrating as well. In this case, we're going to speed things up a little bit again. We're probably going to pop some smoke here to keep ourselves from getting hit by the enemy heavy cruiser's guns. And I'm trying to get a nice and tight turn going here so that I can hopefully target them. We're not going to be able to reload this ship's torpedoes in time, I don't think. But this heavy cruiser is... not the best target. We'll hold off on a little bit on the torpedo salvo. I kind of wish you could fire the torpedoes manually, but that probably would be a little bit overpowered, since the player would be able to, you know, actually pull off a torpedo firing solution, whereas the AI don't really have the capabilities to do that. Also, again, sadly, you have to take... Oh, well, that missed, but okay, video game, sure. You have to baby every single ship in your fleet, which is just incredibly frustrating and literally impossible when you get further on in the game. There is no automatic torpedo evasion, even though there is a mechanic for that in the game that will occur occasionally, like cruisers get it, for example. But destroyers don't. Why? I don't know. I don't know how the formation system works, honestly. And in many ways, the worst part is... yeah. The AI really likes its torpedoes, in large parts because it is incredibly effective against the player. Though, to be fair, most ships at the time did have torpedo launchers of some sort. Alright, well, I'm not going to be able to get a decent shot off against that thing, I don't think. So we'll put them both on save, and we'll see if we can get some decent hits off. And we will put you to retreat. What are you doing? You are being snuggly with that thing. Okay, did you fire your torpedoes? You did. You're reloading them. I guess you managed to miss at point-blank range. I wasn't paying attention, but I would certainly not put it past the AI to do just that. Right. In all due reality, trying to use the formation system is actually pointless, so we'll just have to take everyone out of formation and try to do it manually instead. The AI as well's formation breaks down instantly, immediately. Oh, there we go. That's some good torpedoes, at least. And pretty much every major battle I've been in so far has devolved into, well, this. The AI in a cluster circling around, whilst my ships, hopefully, are taking a more relaxed approach. Or, alternatively, in the worst-case scenario, will be retarding out just as bad, uncontrollably spiraling into one another, until you spend the next 5 to 10 minutes trying to sort out all of their positions. It's honestly kind of weird, because the system they had to begin with in the beta version was in many ways better than the system they have now. Also, there seems to be no way to get your ship out of reverse if you need to activate it, which is also great. The game has practically no tutorial. It has very little in the way of proper tooltips. It will tell you generalized stuff like, okay, if you use this, it might improve this, or... hiccup, excuse me again, that, but it could do a lot more to teach you things. How to carry out a naval invasion, for example. I had to figure that one out by literally reading the Steam forums, which... that leads me into another little point of controversy as well, as the developer is currently kind of busy banning people on the Steam forums for being critical of the game, which is non-ideal, as I'm sure you can understand. Those are not gonna get anywhere even remotely close. Again, firing torpedoes at... or maybe, actually. Firing torpedoes at anything but point-blank range is often an exercise in futility. Though that one was at least a decent shot. Okay. Well, this does not look like an organized naval battle in any way, shape, or form, but this is what most battles honestly degenerate into. I'll see if I can find a bit of a better one to illustrate the point more thoroughly. Where the campaign map will not oblige, custom battle will do. So, this is the fleet that spawned in now. This is roundabout comparable to the largest fleet battle I've had organically in the campaign, although in that one I think I had even more ships. And immediately, you'll start seeing some weird shit happening. So I haven't touched anything here. This is how everything starts. And right off the bat, you can see that one of the cruisers has apparently decided that it is going to turn directly into the battle line for reasons I am completely and utterly unaware of, frankly. Now, what has probably happened is that this cruiser is either tied up to another cruiser on the other side of the formation, or has been given some sort of a screening order in the pre-battle deployment. Sadly, there is no pre-battle deployment that you, the player, gets to do, which is very annoying, incidentally, as well. And so you end up with a bunch of ships turning randomly to try and get to various positions. So, let's see here. So you've got the battleships themselves. They're simply set to advance, nice and simple. Then you've got these guys here, and you can see the lines here. So this is supposed to be the lead ship. The lead ship, excuse me, is in the middle of the formation, with the ship that's supposed to be following it being ahead of it, okay? So that's going to take quite some time to shake out. It is also being told to screen the battleship division. Then this one over here, you've got the lead ship here, then you've got that one, and this one, and again, why was they deployed like this? Now they're going to need to try and cut through the battle line to try and get together again. This formation has actually been deployed in a line, which is a nice surprise. And again, you've got ships. Like, it's actually ridiculous. Like, you've got the lead ship, then you've got the next ship up there, who is who is behind the ship that is supposed to be behind it again. The destroyers, at least, managed to deploy in a line. That's nice. Then you've got one random destroyer over there. This means that at the very start of the battle, you have an incredibly unruly battle line. Honestly, this is nowhere even remotely close to the worst I've seen. Like, at least these ships are not currently ramming into one another right from the get-go. I had one campaign battle where the ships immediately started turning into each other, and that's caused one of the battleships to lag behind, which caused it to gun its engine to try and catch up, which caused it to ram the second battleship in the ass and try to overtake it, which caused that battleship to veer out of line. But then goes like, hey, I'm supposed to be second in line, so it would ram that battleship in the ass, putting that out of line, and so on and so on and so on. And somehow, this formation system has gotten worse over time rather than better. And now, right now, since most of them are on screening order, they're kind of hanging out around the battleships. But if I were to give them orders to try and resume proper straightforward command, if I were to tell them to go steady, for example, like this, I imagine we are going to see something interesting begin to occur. As we tell them all to go straight ahead. And you're all the way over there. That's fine, because you're little DDs. And now you begin to see that they start to reorganize themselves immediately, because now they need to reshuffle their entire battle lines. And there is no reason why they couldn't simply have been deployed like this. Now, luckily, there is no friendly ramming damage, otherwise the game would be actually practically unplayable, but the formation system actually worked better in the beta than it does now, which is just weird. There is also no good way to try and issue fleet-wide orders. If I try to issue a fleet-wide order like this, for example, well, we'll have a look. Maybe it'll work for once. Nope, I don't think so. I really, really, really don't think so. No, I don't think it worked very well. And this wouldn't be the biggest issue in the universe if it weren't for the fact that this also affects the AI, meaning that the AI is almost always clustered up in some ridiculous suicidal formation as you try to get everything else to fit alongside it. All right, let's try. See if we can make it work that it's supposed to work, right? So we're going to tell them to screen, and we're going to tell them to screen the battleships. As that should, in theory, get them to form up on the battleships in a steady formation and to protect them. At least such is the theory again. And we'll have the battleships simply begin turning to engage the enemy at long distance. Now, of course, all of the ships are going to have to derp their way around one another again. Oh, well, that one missed. That's nice. But this should then eventually resolve into something that resembles a fleet formation. Eventually. That's the hope. Let's see how the enemy's doing. The AI has actually done surprisingly well this time around. Their formation is beginning to fracture a little bit, but, well, they're certainly in a lot better formation than I am, so that's not too bad. It feels like every iteration where they try to fix a part of the formation system, they break another part of the formation system. Where I almost feel mean for harping on about it, because frankly, the game does the naval combat formations better than most games do. In fact, better than virtually all games do. Remember naval combat in Empire Total War, for example, where you would set up a nice little battle line like this, and you're like, oh, we're gonna just go past the enemy and shoot at them, except then the enemy would randomly turn right into you for no apparent reason and ram your ships, turning every single battle into a retarded melee for some weird-ass reason. This game, it does do that on occasion, but to a lesser degree. And the degree to which it happens decreases the later on in the campaign you are. So at this point, we've got actual Dreadnoughts, so we're fairly deep into the years here, rather than the early Dreadnought era. And once the ships are able to engage each other at long ranges, like this, well, the formations are certainly a far cry from perfect, but once they've got a good amount of room to play with, it gets a lot less painful. So I would probably recommend that if you're going to play a campaign, start in 1910 at the earliest, and it'll make everything a lot less painful. That does mean that you miss out on a lot of the age of the funny little retarded ironclads and so on, but, well, it depends on how high your tolerance is for this kind of stupid nonsense. Which also, of course, increases the enemy's chance of hitting you. I'll also point out, this is set to loose formations right now. Loose formations. Alright. All in all, as you can... And I will say this, it looks nice. It looks really nice. Like, this looks cool. This looks like a nice... This is actually one of the better naval battles I've seen so far. Again, the cruisers are over there doing whatever the hell the cruisers are doing, but the lines aren't utterly intermingled, you know? There's some fighting going on here. There's trading of blows and cannonades, etc. This looks halfway decent. You could almost believe this to be a proper battle, you know? But what lets down the game by far the most, in my opinion, is, one, the formation system is still not working perfectly, and this has been a problem since beta, and it's been yelled at so many times, and so many people have tried to help or try to fix it or given advice or guidance or whatever, and it still doesn't really work, and it still ends up in kind of ridiculous knife-fighty messes like this, where you've got 4 cruisers just ass-humping each other for reasons that God alone knows. You've got the AI as well. I bet you this DD probably has a couple kilometers torp range. Yes. In fact, if he has torpedoes, he's got 4 kilometers worth of torp range, and yet it just kind of suicides my lines for no apparent reason. The campaign itself, too, is underwhelming. The control you have over your nation is enough to make you feel like you're doing something, and yet not enough to make it feel good. It's very difficult to organize your fleets. You have no information as to your nation's army, so you can't even compare yourself to other nations and whether or not you can win a land war. You have virtually no intelligence services or systems, so beyond actually going to battle and zooming in and looking at the enemy's ships, you have no way to figure out what they have. But you do, remarkably enough, have pretty hardcore numbers on the number of class of ships they have, which is also kind of derpy. In reality, the various nations spent a lot of time and espionage potential trying to figure out what each other were building. This was the reason for the American battle cruisers, for example, that were built in response to what the US thought were Japanese pocket battleships, which actually turned out to be carriers of all goddamn things. The lack of carriers in Air Combat 2 is a big oversight, and well, you can kind of forgive them because, you know, it is Ultimate Admiral Dreadnought. It's not Ultimate Admiral World War II or anything like that, but it is a glaring oversight, particularly as you do actually have some, you know, AA guns mounts and stuff on your ships, but they just don't do anything. The fact that submarines are nothing more than a kind of attritional function that happen on the map and attack ships at random too is a bit disappointing, but I understand, because considering how large these maps are, frankly, submarines would be next to worthless, honestly. They would be too slow to keep up with fleet formations, and you could at best use them as sort of an ambush force, but against the enemy's unpredictable maneuvering, I'm not entirely sure how well that would actually work out. It would also be nice if the game had a bit more in the form of actual tools to organize your fleet. Say, for example, that what I like to do is I like to produce destroyers that have squadrons mentality. So there will be a destroyer leader, which might be a small cruiser or a large destroyer with tons of guns. The destroyer leader's job is to engage enemy destroyers via superior firepower and protect the torpedo destroyers. The torpedo destroyers, meanwhile, of course, just carry as many torpedoes as they can, and their job is to go after enemy capital ships. Ideally, I would like to organize these formations in squadrons of two destroyer leaders and 3 torpedo destroyers. But since you can't really do that, well, you kind of have to hope that the game does it for you, which is a bit annoying. The AI's complete and utter inability to form a battle line, as well as you can see now their lines have completely collapsed now, also means that in reality the game is just really goddamn easy. Once you've built a decent fleet with decent guns, etc., you can pretty much just do what I'm doing here. You know, you set the general kind of course, and then you just lean back and watch your fleet pummel the enemy to death with incredible barrages of voluminous firepower. As in all due likelihood, the enemy fleet will be scattered out over a huge area with no real discernible formation, and thus no real ability to return fire effectively. The enemy fleet is larger than mine is. It's got more heavy cruisers than I do, and yet, as you can see, I am absolutely one-handedly slaughtering them. I am quadrupling their damage output. I'm not even playing, which is, yeah, again, a big issue. It all just amounts to a game that just feels like so much less than what it could be. There are so many wonderful ingredients here, so many pieces of a truly astonishingly good game that just don't quite fit together in a full and wholesome purpose, really. And it's not like in Ultimate General Civil War, for example, there were irking issues, like how, for example, in the campaign, your opposition would get thousands of veteran troops and millions of rifles reinforcing them every turn, no matter how badly you defeated them on the battlefield. That was annoying, that was a game balance issue, and it was a bit of the problem with the GameSlab developers starting to compete with the player base, which is a very, very bad idea, mind you. But here, it's not the little quirks, it's not even the little balance issues, like, again, the fact that I'm not even playing the game and beating the enemy handily. It is the fact that all of the various little mechanics just don't mesh properly. It all feels like it's like it's a month away from greatness, and yet this is a game that's been in early access for years now, and yet the game might be in a rougher state now than when I originally played it. It is a real honest-to-God disappointment, and all I can really do... Oh, holy hell, one of my ships actually sunk. That's nice. All I can really do at the end of the day is repeat my warning at the beginning of the video. Do not purchase this game yet. Hold on for a bit, at the very least until Game Labs releases their roadmap. See if they're going to stick around and support it. See if they're going to try and iron out the kinks. See if they're going to provide some expansion content, bearing in mind that Games Lab really doesn't do that sort of things very often. And basically, just wait and see. Because right now, I mean, there's a game here, but there's nowhere near as much of a game as there should be, given all of the potential of the idea and the people creating it. On the bright side, with the release of this game, I believe that the only other project that Games Labs have in the works at the moment is one other sailing Age of Sail game with more of a simulation crew aspect. And I think, honestly, that is what Games Lab needs to do. They need to focus on one game rather than 3 or 4, which they were doing, and actually make sure that that game is the best that it can be. That it is another Ultimate General Gettysburg or Civil War, rather than another half-baked batch of good ideas and lacking execution. Well, that's about all I've got to say on that topic. I truly do hope, though, that this game can pick itself up and truly deliver on all of the promise, because I know I'm repeating myself, but there genuinely is so much promise here, and it is a damn shame to not see it delivered upon. Until next time, I have been Arch. Thank you all very much for watching, and I hope to see you all again soon. Until then, have a good day.